Hey everyone, we're back again this week to take a look at working within a mix in Pro Tools. In last week's video we took a look at how to apply effects to a vocal track, and we're going to kind of continue the vocal theme, and we're going to use routing and busing once again, just like we did in the last video, and really work with background vocals in this case. But just like before, remember that these types of techniques can be applied to any kind of tracks that you are working with within your song. Okay, so here we are in our session. This is the session we were using in the last demonstration. There's my lead vocal track. But in this case, we're going to focus on how to work with this stuff in context. And one thing that I didn't show you last week that I'll show you now is all of the backing vocals within this session. Notice these red tracks right here. There's 4 of them as I go down. And I'm just going to scroll down in the window so you can see the extent of this. There's more tracks. They're in green. There's some more tracks over here in blue, and finally below those there's some more tracks in like a dark blue color. I just color coded them just for my own sake, but nonetheless all of these tracks together make up the vocal element of the song along with the lead vocal. Now this doesn't even take into account any of the effect sends that we were doing last week. We're going to take a look at this week how to try to manage this within the context of a session to try to make it a little bit easier for you to deal with this kind of stuff. Now just keep in mind that these vocal tracks can be anything. These could be guitar tracks, they could be drum tracks, they could be just part of a rhythm track, like all the back rhythms like the snares and the claps and the rim shots and the hand snaps. That can all be done in the same fashion that I'm going to show you. So let me just solo a few of these tracks. Let's start off with these red tracks. These are the backing vocals for the verse of the song. So I'm just going to solo these. Now there's 4 of these, and I'll just play it real quick.
Magical day, the sun reflects on your face.
Alright, now if I flip over to the mix window, let's do that here. Window, mix. There's my 4 tracks. They're all soloed right here. Now, I'm probably going to have to and want to set a level between them. Like, for instance, I might want to bring these 2 tracks down a little bit compared to these first 2 tracks.
Another magical day, the sun reflects on your face.
Okay, great. But now, it'd be really hard for me in the context of a mix to try to deal with all 4 of these tracks and all of the other background vocal tracks, plus all of the music tracks within the session, and try to find a nice balance between all of them. Right now I have what I consider a nice balance between these tracks in this part of the composition, in these particular background vocal tracks. So if you remember from last week, we used the bus architecture of Pro Tools to allow us to send audio signal to a return track. In this case, we're going to use the bus architecture of Pro Tools to do what's called a subgroup master. We're going to use an auxiliary track, but we're going to use it for a different purpose than we did last time. But now the first step is I'm going to want to assign the output of all of my desired tracks to all have the same output. Now in this case, if you want to make multiple tracks do the same thing, in this case set the output all to have a common output, hold down the Shift key and the Option key. This would be Shift and Start on a PC. And now when I click on the output selector for one track, and I'm going to select New Track as my option for my output, just like we did last week with the send, I'm going to have it come back on a stereo auxiliary input track, and I'm going to label the name of the track BGV1. Okay, so notice what happened. Now we have our 4 original tracks that we had soloed. Those outputs have been set to a bus that's now labeled BGV1, and that bus is returning on a new auxiliary track that was automatically created, which happens to be labeled BGV1, and it's taking input from the bus called BGV1, and then that signal is then going out to the main outputs of our speakers. So in this case, I'm going to have to solo that track. But now what this allows us to do is to use this auxiliary track as what we call a subgroup master. So now if I hit play,
Another magical day.
I can use this one fader from my auxiliary track to control the overall level of all 4 of those tracks that are going to the outputs. So if I wanted to adjust the overall level within a mix, I can just bring up or down this one fader here, as opposed to trying to bring down 4 individual faders. Or in the case of some of my other tracks, there's 12 to 15 different tracks that we'll be controlling all via one subgroup master. The other thing that this does is this now allows us to treat all 4 of these original background vocal tracks as one audio signal that's going out to the speakers. The advantage to this can be related to processing power. For instance, I might listen to my composition here and decide that these background vocals are just a little bit too heavy on the bottom end. They don't have enough top end presence. Since they're all running through this auxiliary subgroup master now, if I go and launch a plugin, I'll be affecting every single audio instance that's running through this track to get to the outputs. So here's my EQ. Now I can just do some basic low cut filtering, get rid of some of that low end presence, and maybe just do a little bit of a high shelf EQ to kind of boost up a little bit of the high end presence of the vocal.
Magical day, the sun reflects on your face, your eyes they sparkle like the clear blue sky. Another magical day, the sun reflects on your face, your eyes they sparkle like the clear blue sky.
Okay, that might sound a little bit better, obviously within the context of the mix. Now at the same time, maybe you want to apply some sort of compression or some sort of other dynamic processor. You can do this all through this one subgroup master instead of having to put an EQ or a compressor on every single one of the original tracks. Now we can keep on repeating this process for the remainder of our tracks that we want to subgroup. Let's get rid of these solos and let's flip back to the edit window. So now I have, for the chorus of the song and part of the pre-chorus, I have these other set of tracks. They're in green. Just solo those.
Summer night in Seattle, when you kiss me.
Okay, same thing here. I have a bunch of tracks, in this case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different tracks that are all just going to the outputs. Let's flip back to the mix window. Each one has its own fader, its own pan level. Now, the relative mix between them could be okay. It's just a matter of controlling their overall context within a session. So I'm going to repeat the same process as before. I'm going to select all of my track names, hold down the Shift and Option command. Remember, Shift and Start on a PC. Select the output of one track and select the new track option. We're going to return this on a stereo auxiliary input and we'll call it BGV2. Notice once again it automatically creates the output of my selected tracks as BGV2, and then it returns that into this new auxiliary track here on the input side, and it also labels the new auxiliary track BGV2. So now when I solo this, I have once again control over this subgroup of tracks via this one fader.
Summer night in Seattle, when you kiss me under the moonlight, let the raindrops fall all around us as I sail on the way.
All right, now we can continue this process down to the rest of our tracks. Let's flip back over to the edit window again so you can see. So I've got this large grouping of tracks here, which are background vocals once again, starting from here, ending all the way down here. I'm going to do the same thing as before. I'm going to just first solo them so you can hear them.
Summer night in Seattle, when you kiss me.
Alright, so let's flip back to the mix window. Hold down the Shift Option commands on the keyboard. Select the output of our audio tracks as a new track routing, give the new auxiliary input and the bus path a name. In this case, we'll just stick to BGV3. Oops, 3. Now notice the routing is complete. The output of these tracks is now a bus called BGV3. The input of the new auxiliary track is BGV3, and that is once again feeding the main outputs. So now we can blend the overall level of all of these male background vocals.
Summer night in Seattle,
When you kiss me under the moonlight,
let the raindrops fall all around us as I sail on the wake of your love. In your arms I'm closest to heaven.
And once again, the same thing applies. There's a chance that you might want to put some sort of EQ, some sort of compression on the overall background vocal layer. You can do that more effectively now on this auxiliary subgroup master because all the audio signals, once again, are running through this track before they go to the output. So any processing that you put on this track affects the overall audio signal. Now, we can spend days mixing this on a further level, but I hope that you've been able to see the power of using this bus and return architecture for not only effects like we've talked about before, but also for these types of mix scenarios where you have a lot of tracks and you need to mix them all more effectively and to have more effective control over them as a whole. Hope you have some fun with this.